went home and I had like a whole face print here. Okay. Great to see so many of you here. It's the end of 2 days of innovation, so it's fantastic to have so many of you here for our final session of the day. And we've called this session One Public Service, joining up government at all levels. And I think that's because we've been talking about innovation, we've been talking about transformation. If we get all that right, it is ultimately about improving those services to the public and making those services as streamlined as possible for our citizens. So we're going to be talking about all things connected to joining up government at all levels and what that looks and feels like for us as kind of people working in government, but also for the citizen. We have a really fantastic, very international, very diverse final panel to end innovation with. You, the audience, have been brilliant. I know I've said this for the whole today, but you really have been fantastic in terms of your engagement with our speakers. So please keep that right up until the end today. And this is your chance to ask any question that you don't think has fitted into any of the other sessions. So I did warn our speakers here, they could be asked absolutely anything in this final session. I will introduce our speakers. We'll have a short conversation. I've got a few questions that I'm going to put to them, but then it's over to you, the audience, to have that kind of interaction until we close innovation for this year. So in terms of our brilliant panel that we have us, and most of you will know you've been involved in innovation for both days, but we have Chris Bellamy, who is the Government Chief Product Officer at the Government Digital Service, the GDS, here in the UK. Then sitting next to Chris, we've got Lucas Ilves, who is advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister at the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine. We heard from one of your deputy ministers earlier, and I think you also have worked in very senior levels in the Estonian government as well, Lucas. And then we've got Birna Jonsdottir, who is CEO for Digital Iceland, so always great to have you with us here from Iceland. And then Theo, who I've known for quite a long time, actually, Theo Blackwell, who is the Chief Digital Officer for London at the Greater London Authority. So it's great to have somebody from kind of local government, but interestingly, will be telling us about some work that you've been doing also with GDS, Theo. And then last, but by no means least, we've got Andre Reiste, who is the Senior Vice President for Public Sector Global at one of our partners today, Nortel. So really wonderful to have you all with us here today. I'm going to start with a very simple question, given the topic of the session, but also what we've been discussing for the last 2 days. And Chris, I'm going to start with you, which is, what would a kind of joined up government look like? What do we mean by one public service? If you're the citizen, how different would that look and feel from where we are today?
Yeah, thank you so much. What a panel. This is a great way to end. This is really interesting. I think for the last 10, 12 years, in many of our countries, there's been some great innovation around how we think about service design. GDS sort of started that work about 12 years ago. Our colleagues in Iceland and Estonia are sort of trailblazers about how we do that. But I think for me, something's gone wrong with the horizontal. We've not thought about how we think about the user in a way that sort of starts to think about the services, which fundamentally start with them, not the service. And that might not seem like a big step change, but it sort of is. So I was talking to colleagues from DWP this week who are thinking about the work they do in universal credit, and they are absolutely sweating that asset to make sure it's the best service it can possibly be, and they've been doing that for the past 10 years. But actually, if you're a young mum or dad and you get universal credit and you also have to deal with a bit of support with childcare, which comes from another department, and you also need to make sure you know what you're doing with sort of fees that might be for your parents, your life just doesn't work by service, actually. So you want to come to government and you want it to be there and you want to be able to see where you are in that journey quickly. Context is sort of key. And so for me, the big step change is making sure that you start fundamentally with the user, and then you think about the service and how all that ties together. And I think in the UK, we see that as the problem to solve. And the wonderful thing is the technology is there to solve it. We can learn from people on this panel about how to do that. But we fundamentally need to now start thinking about the horizontal. And then if you think about yourself in a local capacity, and Theo will talk about this, you really aren't too worried about local central government. You don't think about it as separate things. You don't care about it. The key thing you want to do is be able to get what you need from government as quickly as possible and then leave, and government fails into the background. So for me, it's all about that joined up horizontal.
Right, and I think that point really interesting. The amount of people that I speak to, my kind of friends and family, who have no distinction between what's delivered locally and what's delivered by central government. And my assumption was everybody kind of understands that, and no, they don't. And why should they?
Why should
they understand that? Thanks so much. So, Lucas, the same question to you. What does a really, truly joined-up government look and feel like to the citizen?
So let me comment on what both Estonia and Ukraine have done well, but also where the limitations are. Two very different countries in terms of size, although a lot of similarities in approach. So I think the good news in Estonia is, to some extent, most citizens would say, yeah, it works pretty well. And there's been a lot of effort that's gone into sort of looking at life events in a sort of holistic way and bringing together lots of different people in government. The challenge, though, is the work we've done doesn't scale very well. Building a proper life event is expensive. And it's not expensive because of the technology. You know, you get the platforms right and everything, and that can be fairly inexpensive, and it scales. It's expensive because of the human labor. You know, if you have a complex life event that calls on dozens of departments and, you know, within central and local government, even in a small place like Estonia, then that is tens of product owners, tens of lawyers, et cetera, who have to spend a lot of hours sitting together to get that service to be redesigned, and that is just expensive. And so one of the problems we've had in Estonia is, well, how do we make sure that we continuously and sustainably run this kind of holistic, you know, focus on the user in a way that doesn't break the bank? And I think that doing that in larger countries just gets even more difficult. And to get to Ukraine, a much larger country with a complex federal system, the part of digital services that has kind of gone through the process of being put in the DIA app, which Valeria talked about in the morning, and going through this proper design process is truly fantastic, amazing user experience. But the reality is that there are dozens, coming up on 100 services there, and there's still a huge sort of portion of government that hasn't yet been sort of treated with that kind of brilliant medicine. And so in Ukraine, we're also asking, well, how do we take what we've done and scale that 100x to really get to every service interaction across every level of government? So I think maybe the point from these two examples is we have the best practices. We kind of know what good looks like, but I don't think we've figured out organizationally anywhere how to sustainably do that in a way that also fits into all the other constraints on budget and, you know, people and so on. And that maybe is it's an organizational managerial challenge as much as anything else.
Does there not come a point where it becomes, like you reach a point where it becomes easier, cheaper, faster to onboard new services when you've learned from the ones that you've already done? You've got a center of expertise, you've got people who are used to doing it.
Hopefully. Notionally, I mean, it clearly does become cheaper, but the question is, how much cheaper does it become? Yeah. And I think, you know, there may be some fancy uses of AI that we can do to sort of shortcut some of these processes, and that will be part of the answer. But it's an open hypothesis, and maybe others will challenge me on this, but I haven't seen the evidence yet that the sort of service design process without the humans in the loop happens. So maybe it becomes a strong enough force of habit that in 5 or 10 years it's sort of built into the woodwork. Yeah. But that's a pretty serious effort we have to undertake.
Yeah, thanks. So, Birna, I'm going to come to you. So, Lucas there mentioned kind of life events, and Chris was talking about life events. Whenever I hear people talk about life events, I always think of Iceland as kind of the gurus of service design around life events. So, how far are you on this journey, and is it making a difference to citizen services?
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for having me here. And it's been a very interesting couple of days. And just to put Iceland in perspective, we are a tiny country, right? But still we have to provide all the public services. So there's no shortcut there. And well, Iceland is, we have approached the life events in successful manner, and we have managed collaboration. And I think a key for the seamless and fast service delivery is collaboration. It's everything. Collaboration through central government and the municipalities and all. And what I think we need to think about also is, so I listened to Chris yesterday talking about the alpha generation and the issues of trust. And I mean, we have the issues of trust regarding the situation in the world today, right? And all of the cyber crime, etc. So I think that this is something that we really, really need to think about at this point. But in Iceland, we have come far. Definitely, we have come very far with many of our processes, and one of our key is the distribution of EIDs, for example. So making public services accessible to a lot of, I think it's around 96% of the population who has the electronic IDs. But still, we have a far way to go, and currently we are putting our focus on data, which we can do a lot better in data management and maturing data. So
thanks. We've had several sessions on digital IDs, EIDs, digital credentials, and we might come back to, Chris, I might ask you this later, is can we truly be one public service without a digital ID? So that would be an interesting conversation to have as well. Theo, I will ask you in a moment about your time here in the central government, because I know you've been doing some work in central government. But from where you sit in the London Assembly, what would a one public service look like for Londoners? How would that feel different?
I think we've been on a journey in London towards a kind of more of a one city approach. I mean, you've got to, on the one hand, respect the autonomy of each of the London boroughs. But we also together recognise there's quite a lot of duplication and waste. So that's why we set up the London Office of Technology and Innovation, which brings together the 32 or 28 of the 32 CDOs from London boroughs. And they do a variety of things. There's quite a lot of work around standards and methods. So I put that in the kind of fix the plumbing space. But ostensibly what we were trying to do is get to a place where we were working with data better. I want to talk to someone from public health when I was at the London Borough of Camden, and we shared public health function with the London Borough of Islington. And they said that the population size of a London borough of 350,000 people was actually just not enough to cook with. When you were looking at vulnerability, the people who are really driving costs have the most needs. You need to be able to share data a lot better, maybe get up to the kind of million, 1.5 million, 2 million category. I know colleagues in here may ponder the same questions. But so for us, it's like, how can we share data better so our leaders can make more better informed decisions, but also spin up services, do the modeling required, use advanced data analytics. Those are really fundamental questions for us. And getting into that sort of data services space is hard. It's not really been the focus of government or indeed local government, but I think it is the real path to innovation. And just to kind of conclude with one example, the London Office of Technology and Innovation worked with GLA and all of the London boroughs to understand homelessness. So it brought together data from charity providers, data from the Greater London Authority, and data from the councils themselves on the homelessness pathways. So now we've got one full vision of homelessness and people's journeys through the system in our city. That's tremendously important. And the first benefit of that was to those who are serving the homeless themselves. It allowed them to challenge their own assumptions about what was happening to people and make practical actions as a result. So that kind of road to action is fundamentally important.
Thanks. And that the importance of data, of gathering the right data, but also sharing it in the right way, and data management has been central to so many of
Absolutely.
the conversations we've had over the last couple of days. Thanks so much. And then lastly, Andre, I'm going to come to you. So obviously you sit now with Nortel, you sit outside but work with lots of different public sector bodies, different governments around Europe. How ambitious should they be when it comes to kind of thinking about one public service? And do you think there are pockets where this is going well, or should they be thinking even bigger than they are?
What I like about these panels, international panels, is that it really drives the point that I think all governments are actually trying to solve a very similar problem.
Yeah.
So we talk about trust, we talk about different types of barriers for modernization of the governments and so forth, but I believe that fundamentally all governments are trying to solve very similar problems. So how to provide better public services, what are the means necessary to do that. And often one parallel that I'm often bringing up is from the private sector, that we often hear that citizens do not trust the governments with their data, but at the same time they're very willing to give that data, for example, to Facebook or Instagram. Why do they do that? Why would somebody trust a private company with their data more than government? And turns out this is actually a well-researched area. They do that because they receive something of emotional value in return. So I think that if we look at the governments that have been capable of modernizing the civil service the most, this is exactly the point where they're succeeding the most. They're giving something in return that is so valuable that in return, they're willing to share their personal data in return for something that is very valuable for them. In terms of digital services, that mostly looks like that I'm willing to consent to sharing my data if I receive, for example, personalized experience, I don't need to visit the government and so forth. So looking at how the technology has progressed as well, those most modern examples that have been showcased here, it's lovely to see what GDS is currently rolling out, and the other governments, Estonia, Ukraine, and so forth, and all over the world. So there are common traits. So it kind of, channels are going mobile, and generally the service experience is becoming easier and easier. But the governments that are succeeding with this, in reality, there are common denominators that what are those main blockers that they are solving. So there's very trivial things there that are trivial for some for some governments, but certain things that we can talk about for the 20 years, but in reality actually take political will, certain amount of voter confidence, and navigating different policies and regulations to roll out. So we're talking about same things like digital credentials. Practically speaking, there's very little that can be done without it unifying the local and regional level governments, data exchange. So these sort of things that are, well-researched areas that can be rolled out, but requires certain policies, certain attitudes towards unifying the government. And these, in reality, are necessary to simplify the experience, which in return creates that political capital and voter confidence in return, and trust. And we talk a lot about data privacy and what does it take really to create that sort of, let's say, momentum for the citizen to start trusting the government with their data. I really love this example from Estonia that maybe Lucas can talk more about, but that kind of looks like this, that as a citizen, I'm also an Estonian citizen, so as a citizen, whenever somebody uses from the government my data, I see it in real time. So almost like radical transparency towards the what is government actually doing with my data. So this is like a fundamental policy to data privacy almost, that in reality citizens own the data, and in return the civil service is capable providing better outcomes. And I think this is really the fundamental policy that we can learn from different governments, that if we can focus on the citizen and that actually has to manifest as policies, then that can create enough voter confidence to actually succeed with those transformations.
Brilliant. Thanks, Audrey, because that kind of brings us in a loop back to what you said, Chris, at the beginning, is real starting with the focus on the citizen and making those services easy for the citizen to use, and that they can see the immediate benefit to them. And therefore, that's going to be a virtuous circle. They're then going to trust the government more in terms of providing that data. We did in the session before have a conversation about the transparency of how Estonia uses the citizens' data and how you can always see who's using your data in which bits of government, which I think is really interesting. I am going to come to the audience in a minute, so I've just got one quick question each, and then I do want to make sure that the audience get kind of a lot of chance to have some questions in this final panel. But Chris, I do want to end on a kind of really exciting note as well. So I know there's lots going on in the UK. What's next? What can the citizen look forward to?
No, it's a really good question. So it's a really exciting time in the UK. So if you've listened in the last couple of days, you'll have heard the launch of the digital blueprint that sets out the vision for government, and colleagues such as Theo have been really close to that work. But the rubber needs to hit the road, right? We need to do some things. So this summer, in June, we'll start to roll out the gov.uk app, which does start to think about joined up public services, right? It's the start of that journey. We can do it this year because we've done so much work in the One Login programme in the UK that we've got that sort of critical mass of being able to do it. So you'll get into the autumn and we'll be working hard to get people to download that and put it on their phones. We're specifically targeting the sort of 18 to 25-year-olds. It's for everyone, but we're going to do a big piece of work to make sure that we've got a problem between that age group with their relationship with the state. And so we get an opportunity to show them that government can be simple and you can interact it in a simple way. So you'll see that in the summer. You'll start seeing things like the digital driving licence in the UK at the end of this year, with our Secretary of State's announced earlier. Some of that's catch up compared to some other countries, but actually it's a massive shift for the UK because you are starting to think about the interaction of the citizen and the state in a different way, which is dead exciting. But what you're doing for the first time then is you're starting to say what's possible and how local comes into that, and the work we'll do with health in the future. So it's going to be quicker than fixing the trains, I reckon, to get digital right. So if you're in the UK in the next couple of years and you're citizens in the room, you will start to see the difference quickly in the next 12 to 18 months, actually on the phone in your pocket, and your interaction with the state should just fundamentally feel more modern.
So fantastic. So next year you can come back and we can go through some of the things that have been delivered. Fantastic. And Birna, again, on an upbeat note, I'm going to ask you, can you give us, say, an example of something that's been fundamentally transformed in Iceland for the benefit of the citizen?
Yes, well, we have the driver's license, obviously, and all of that process is digitized. So you know, a few years, well, 2 or 3 years ago. So that's something. We see a lot of benefit in our digital mailbox. So all the government agencies and all the municipalities, they have to, by law, deliver documents to the digital mailbox. Mm-hmm. And this is a huge benefit. I mean, we were costing for the operation of sending everything by paper, it costs around 8.6 million pounds, and this cost has dropped to 8,600.
Wow!
So that's a lot of benefit, both for the operations and for the citizen themselves. And we have criminal records, we have passports, and more of those processes digitized, and also the communication to the citizen. We have the chatbot, and we see a lot of chats going through there, meaning that the government offices and departments don't have to service. Yeah. And also because we have put focus on building up the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure. And then we had Iceland is, as some of us know, is a volcanic island, right? And in November 2023, we had this Grindavík, a small town, who was, under the lava, basically. At least 3 houses went under the lava. And in just a very short time, due to these digital infrastructures, we were able to put up sites with information for all inhabitants, because we had to evacuate all the inhabitants. Set up applications, because you had to apply to enter the town, and also applications for the inhabitants to apply for the government to buy their house. So all of this, we have to say, in such a crisis, the infrastructure and the digital processes really help us react to such crisis. So those are a few examples of our success.
It's great when I ask for one and you can reel off like so many examples, which is brilliant. Thanks. Theo, I have to say, yesterday we had a question, I think twice your name came up, because we had questions around the extent to which we're not doing enough to link up local and central government, and could we do more in that space? So I just wondered, you have been spending some time in GDS. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and how you hope that's going to kind of benefit both ways?
Yeah, well, the answer is yes. A lot more can be done. There's a former colleague, Neil Williams, who was at gov.uk and also was the CDO of Croydon, described the relationship between central and local. When you look at it from a local perspective, is central government was like a cold, distant star to you in the locality, and I quite agree with that. Look, the mandate is there in the blueprint to repair that relationship. I think previous administrations had either kind of like left out local government, or specifically, you are not in scope, or there just wasn't a permissive environment to engage. And that's a shame, because there are so many live services that GDS have developed that could reduce costs and transform local government. And I think we need to do more to connect the two. And the first step is human beings. It's that relationship. It's not good enough to just kind of say, look, you could adopt it. You need to be in a room with people. You need to be at events. You need to be able to team someone with a question. And so I think certainly with my work, strengthening that community of practice is the first step between central and local government, strengthening community practice around technology, around data and AI, and also around digital services. We've got lots of networks, but we don't quite have the network effect of all of them working together. By that, I don't just kind of mean like, let's have a meeting every month with 6 things on the agenda item and a sort of professional therapy session, good as they all are. I mean things that use more applied learning techniques, a kind of pedagogy of like how we scale things. So I think that's step 1. Step 2 in the relationship goes back to this data point. We need to free the data. The state of the local government IT market is a national disgrace. It's a very embedded legacy technology supplier market that effectively locks up the data from deriving value for our citizens. And going back to the point about looking at things sort of horizontally, the citizen journey, IT stops that happening. So I think we need to think about the power of government, and only the power of government can change markets, to start it on that journey. And we've seen some good examples elsewhere in government. And then the third area, very briefly, where we can really show difference here between central and local, is investing in showing the thing at a local level. It's like saying, how can we show how data makes a difference to your city, to your region? And for that, we need to invest in capabilities somewhere between central and local government level, somewhere that, in a way that doesn't kind of tell local authorities what they need to do. It's just say, we know you've got this challenge, and we can give you some capability to solve that. And here, final point, here I think the National Data Library, if you can do things like free up Department of Work and Pensions data, with a particular area in the country and say, like, yeah, with this universal credit data and all of the data you have, you can actually take a set of actions that improve people's lives. Go.
Brilliant.
We need to be in that zone.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm now coming to Lucas and Andre, because I want to ask you both similar questions. We've learned there about sharing between local government and central government. Both of you have kind of worked in several countries. Could we get better at sharing good practice between countries? And also, Andre, I want to, Theo said that IT can lock in data and stop sharing, but actually good IT, I guess, and good systems can help to facilitate sharing as well. So I think maybe there's a difference between legacy systems and new ways of doing things. So your thoughts on how we can get better at learning from each other and using technology and IT to facilitate some of
Yeah, so in my opening comments, I talked about the cost challenges of scaling this all up, and now let's talk about how we solve some of those. And yeah, in a very simplistic way, we could say sharing, but let's get a little bit more granular on what that means. And I'll give you kind of two examples of sharing that I've seen, and I think that these are international examples, but we can also think about how this could work within one complex system. The first of those is really quite shamelessly copying. And Estonia, when it was first starting on its EID journey, it just copied what the Finns were doing on EID, and then it deployed it better than the Finns did. When the Ukrainians started in 2019 on their digital journey, they had a very explicit mandate to copy Estonia. And what they've said is they saved several years by doing that, because there were just a whole bunch of wheels they didn't have to reinvent. So the data platform in Ukraine is Estonian software. A lot of the laws were rewritten based on what we'd done in Estonia. And that sharing now goes in both directions. The Ukrainians started, they were doing this in 2019-20, mobile first. So they got to having a government app before Estonia did. So when we were doing an app in Estonia, we went to the Ukrainians and said, help us. And our prototype of the app was built by a joint Estonian and Ukrainian team. And that helped us in Estonia, again, save a lot of time. So one thing is just to be very humble about what others have done well and copy that. And that can be copying tech, that can be copying design patterns. But then, of course, there's a step beyond just copying and sharing and collaborating, which is actually building together. And this is something that Estonia and Iceland, along with Finland, do. We actually build our data platform together. The three of us own it together through a common NGO that has a small team that does the procurements. And we make available open source, so you're welcome to use it. Works in big countries, too. And I think that the future of what's going to happen is going to be a lot more within countries, between countries, of having common ownership of products or having a sort of consolidated buyer relationship against some of the big vendors. Because, look, IT is fundamentally about, seamless copying of information without any loss. So if something's been done well in one place, there may be tweaks you have to make, but everything that works well, you might as well copy. And I think we just have to be very conscious about not getting stuck in the rut of just saying going to conferences and sharing experience is what cooperating is. Like, we can go a lot deeper.
Yeah, thanks. Andre, your final thoughts on kind of how much more we can steal from each other, but also collaborate with each other?
Steal from each other. Yeah, but I think perhaps it's not actually about tech exchange that much. It's more about what are the fundamental learnings of living in a, let's say, digital society. What can we learn, for example? I mean, I come from a society where we have an entire generation of people who have never had to visit the government office in their life. So it changes how the people think about it. So what are the long-term policies and their outcomes on a kind of like what can we learn from that? So, and there are different societies where we can learn completely different, like how different type of policies have worked out in different societies. I think that these are perhaps the most underutilized mechanisms of government-to-government cooperation. Sometimes not the tech part, but perhaps the policies part. What are those, let's say, why it works on such a society? How have you navigated the data privacy concerns, for example? And so it's almost like a digital anthropology that doesn't exist as a field, but perhaps should. So it's these sort of lessons learned. And these are obviously, at least in my opinion, also the most interesting after-party discussion points that I would encourage to engage in. Perhaps that, and the other part, I mean, like Lucas also, like what you said, actually also debunking one myth perhaps that, that yes, those things tend to cost sometimes a lot, but one of the lessons learned what we have is that actually what perhaps drives for innovation is actually the lack of funding.
Right.
So one thing that, Lucas, you didn't mention, but because we don't think about it that much, is that Estonia actually digitalized because we didn't have money to do anything else.
Yeah.
There is one very common joke from Estonia that one of the first digital services was short joke. So elderly civil servant working in a very small town in Estonia collecting taxes, and government didn't have money for any other civil servant. So the poor woman was tired, wanted to go home, turned the monitor around and told the people that enter it yourself.
Mind you, now our problem is we have too much money, so we've lost some of that scrappiness.
Good point also for Ukraine. I mean, they are digitalizing under unimaginable circumstances because that drives for innovation. So what is the will that drives for innovation? And that's also a learning point, that what drove for it.
Yeah.
So all the civil servants should go to their ministers and ask for a 50% budget cut and deliver better results, right?
Let's be honest, if we're talking about government efficiency, digital has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
So, so all these sort of things, these are the interesting lessons learned that we can actually share.
And yet sometimes we still struggle to put the business case for innovation. So that's really an interesting point.
And what drives for innovation?
Yeah. Right. I'm really conscious. We have 15, 20 minutes left. So over to the audience for your final questions. There is a hand here, and then 2 hands here, hand over there, and there might be one over there as well. So let's go here first.
Hello, my name's Harriet. I'm part of the MOJ. I'm really curious to know, obviously, a lot of this digital stuff looks amazing. It looks so useful. It's such a great development. But as part of my role, I deal with a lot of people who don't have access to that technology. We deal with people who have just exited the prison system, people who are on probation. These are people who oftentimes are some of the poorest people in society. What considerations are being made when we're making this technological advancement for those people that don't have direct access to, say, a mobile phone, or they have to go to a library to access digital services, which obviously they have their own opening hours. So there are restrictions to those people, and I'm sure that applies across to a wider base of people as well. So what considerations are being made when we're developing those services, and also how are you seeing the effect on those people? Are they being disenfranchised by this move in a way that they're having to access services in the traditional sense?
Yeah. Great question. And anyone who's had to help their parents navigate will know how difficult it is for some people.
I'm really happy to take it. So in this country, about 15% of, it's a really hard number, 15% of the population they're not going to use digital routes. And they're not all old, right? They're absolutely the people you've described. They're also the people we described yesterday on stage when we talked about the alpha generation. They're a real mix, and it's a real stubborn number. And we can do a lot, and we have got a digital inclusion plan in this country to try and move the number. My view is it's a stubborn number, and so you need to make sure there are all routes available for them to do it. Key is you need to make sure the 85% do it quickly, and because it doesn't help if it doesn't work for them, doesn't make it better for the other 15%. It's really important that your core, easy, get to your service quickly works and your plan works. For the 15%, it is important that there are face-to-face channels. It's really important that they can get it. 2 examples in the UK, the One Login program, you absolutely can do that face-to-face, and you can get your login from any post office in this country. A brilliant example, if you go to a job centre in Manchester and you're homeless, they give you a mobile phone with a free data pack on it. They've got points in the street where if you're homeless, you can plug your phone in. And they're now also looking, if you want to access a government service, it's for free and there's no data used. Yeah, let's be candid. They might not keep that phone for a week because they might have to buy something else with it because their lives are really hard. But so what, actually? Because for that moment, they are able to access services. So I think the state is brilliant in places like job centres of picking people up. We need to make it easier that people know that's an option. So yeah, we cannot leave anybody behind.
Right, Theo, I'm going to come and then we'll take the next question. Theo.
So 2 points here. One is, I've learned from hard experience that to get up in front of colleagues and talk about innovation without having a really rock solid digital inclusion plan is just a waste of time. You know, you are allowed to talk about innovation in a city once you've got your plan in place.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're not allowed to do that. And secondly, you know, this is kind of like where the kind of central local thing comes in. You know, local government is really, really close to the lived experience of people and the complexity of their lives. So the interventions that we've seen locally on digital inclusion are the ones that actually are more granular, follow the user's journey. The piloting of the Good Things Foundation sort of package, which gives you free data, a refurbished device from a public sector organisation or business, or the online training program, which is kind of sculpted around user needs, is an absolutely fantastic initiative, and it's because of those connections with local government and their connections with business that you're able to roll it out across a region and seed it nationally.
Right, Lucas wants to come in really quickly. Then
I
we will
want to
take this.
targetedly disagree on the idea that you have to figure out digital inclusion first. And I'll tell you why. Yeah, the end state is going to be getting to the stubborn 15 or maybe the stubborn 5% in Estonia. But if you make that a precondition, you're not going to start. I mean, Ukraine in 2019 it was a fairly poor country, still is, had a level of smartphone usage, all of this far below any EU member state. And there were a lot of naysayers saying, we can't put the state in a smartphone because that's only going to be useful for half the people. And if they had let them stop that, they wouldn't have built the thing. And so I guess my counterpoint, and I'm just being consciously provocative, is build the thing for the 20 or 30% who can use it right away. Because if it's a good thing, it will very quickly get picked up by the 85 to the 90%. So I mean, getting to the point where you have the stubborn 15% and then you can work on that, that is already a champagne problem. And then you have the resources. But if you don't build something that's good enough for 85%, and that is hard, you're not going to get there. So doesn't mean don't do the inclusion, but like make sure you don't make that a precondition.
I don't disagree with that. I suppose to refine my statement, I was saying if you're in a democratic forum, you know, you're trying to convince your colleagues that this is the way forward, whether your colleagues are MPs or local councillors or public servants. If you do not have an answer to that question, people will question the motives behind your technology and also think you're probably more obsessed with the solution rather than the lives of people. So there is in a sense, a strong storytelling thing, and I don't say that glibly. There's a strong storytelling element to the sequencing of what you do, and I wouldn't advise anyone to walk in without.
Fair enough, fair enough.
It's a shame because I love it when we have a bit of disagreement on a panel. It doesn't happen often, but we don't have time to get into this. Next question over here. Somebody has the mic. Thanks.
Hello. Yeah, hi. My question is around the data access for the citizens. When you mentioned about citizens being able to see who is accessing their data or who is using their data. And I know that in some countries like Iceland, for example, crime rate is very low. My question is really around maybe when different departments are sharing this information to try and tackle fraud, how this data access for citizens to be able to view who's using their data, how does it work when the different departments are collaborating among themselves to try and tighten fraud? I just want to see how you incorporate all that.
So that's a really interesting. So what you mean is how would you be openly transparent if you're sharing data and maybe checking if somebody is doing something criminal, for example,
Yeah, for
would you
example.
be open about that with the member of the public?
No, I mean, the quick factual answer, at least in Estonia's case, legitimate law enforcement access and crime prevention is not something you get transparency on as an end citizen when it's happening. There are a lot of other controls, so the various sort of data protection authorities do see that, and there's some kinds of data access where you'll be informed ex post, say once a crime's been investigated. But no, I mean, we're not, this is not a pact to like cut off your state capability. You can, you have a legislative and a legal framework, and it's not 100% of the data that's immediately transparent. You do have the product design, and you can sort of pick what it is. It's 98%, but also being very clear and transparent about the data that isn't made public and why it isn't and what the control mechanisms are.
Thanks. I know we have a couple of questions here. We've got one at the front, so we'll take these two. So if we can have if you keep your hand right up, thank you. There's one here, thanks.
Hi, afternoon to everyone, and thank you for today. It's been absolutely fantastic. I'm Magdalene, and I'm from the Home Office. So my question is sort of personal, where I've attended today, and there've been some great talks about AI, mostly positive, some a bit fearful. So I was wondering, how has the organisers utilised AI in putting this event together?
Go on.
This is good, yeah. It's a
Turn the
great
tables.
question. It's a really, really good question. And my honest answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I can absolutely find out, and I'm sure we will have used it in some way, and we'll be using it. You're all now in our system somehow. So I'm sure. But it's a really good question, and probably at the heart of that is probably goes to the fact that AI will be used in every kind of area, I think, very soon. So there will probably be something about the registrations that we've used, how we've automated the replies to people, picking the speakers, understanding who's spoken with us before. Those kind of areas, I'm sure we'll have used some form of AI. And you've all been scanned as you came in. I'm sure there'll be some implications of that. I'll get back to you on that one. We'll definitely come back to you on that one. Question here at the front. One thing I would say is don't be fearful. We're not going to use it in any damaging way against you. Thank you, Anne. Question down here at the front.
Thanks very much, panel. So I suppose ultimately humans are pretty fickle. I have given clearly Meta and Instagram all the data that they have on me, and yet am I so keen on, when Camden Council ask me what my details are, am I so keen on giving them that? Mm-hmm. I suppose my kind of question, and kind of probably where my mum comes from, she's perhaps one of those in the 15% who are less keen on sharing data, is we are in an era of state interventions and foreign actors, and where data can be, there are data breaches. I'm very keen at having worked in local government and now in central government, I'm in the Department for Transport, for the ability for data to be used across borders. However, with creaky systems in local government, which I remember working on some of those legacy systems, and data breaches which inevitably happen and will continue to happen. We saw WannaCry several years ago with the NHS. How do we get that checks and balances right? Interesting particularly in how that perhaps has happened in Estonia, Ukraine and in Iceland, but also how do we avoid that in central government in the UK?
Thanks. So a really good question. How do you, not just you might not trust your own government, but how do you know that that government is safe from intervention from other governments? I'm going to take one more question because I know we have a final question, and then our panellists, it will be your last chance. You can answer one or both questions. So the lady there with the mic.
Okay. Thank you. My name's Faye from DWP. My concern, actually, it was similar to the first person that spoke. My concern is for the elderly. My mum's no longer here, God rest her soul. However, my dad, he's in his late 80s. Now, he doesn't actually claim any benefits. However, as much as I'm happy that we are moving with the times, and I come from a creative background, so this is amazing for me, my concern is that although my dad has a smartphone, he wears a hearing aid, so we have to make sure that the smartphone's compatible. Now, my question may be probably best suited for either Chris and Theo to answer, because we're in the UK. Now, my concern is that where we're moving so fast forward, how can we make sure that we do not alienate those that are vulnerable, elderly? Then we've got silver service, yes. However, those that, according to, even though Lucas said they're the stubborn ones, they're not all stubborn.
Yeah.
So respectfully, they are not all stubborn. I have to agree to disagree. How can we make sure that
They're not left behind.
We do not leave them behind, and how can they? Is there a program? Say, like I said, my dad does not claim benefits. So is there a program whereby we could allow them to go somewhere, or have somebody like a visiting officer, for instance, or someone from HUK go to their homes and help them navigate the systems so that they can
Sorry, I'm going to have
move
to,
with the times,
just
you know?
because we're out of time, but brilliant question.
Yeah.
Brilliant question for that. So we have two great questions there. One is, how can you be sure that foreign governments, foreign states maybe are not going to be able to get hold of your data that the government here hold on you? And secondly, the elderly in particular, of all those who might want to, it's not they don't want to, it's not like Generation Alpha maybe where they don't want to, it's those who the pace of change has just kind of left them behind. We are out of time, so it's like a minute each, if that's all right. I'll start there, and I'll come back to you, because Chris, I want to give you the last word.
Pleasure.
Andre, over to you.
Yeah, I'd start with the first one, that that goes into the realm of data sovereignty. So very politically hot topic during the last recent months that several countries are navigating on. Like speaking from the Estonian experience a little bit, so that maybe you have heard about the data embassy program that the Estonian government has or created roughly around 10 to 15 years ago. So when at one point it was started to be understood that the government registries that are the fundamental necessary for the continuance of the state, that only protecting them within the Estonian borders might not be enough for the long-term security of the government. So different discussions at that point were held, like how can we work with international partners to like different governments to hold that data secure across the border. So obviously that nowadays we're talking about clouds and so forth. Can we have government data in foreign soil? So that's a very complex regulative questions that all the governments now are Europe is regulating on and so forth, that will take probably decades to resolve. So this is a very political question, but like fundamentally data sovereignty is something that we're all navigating on. The other part of this is like fundamentally to avoid data breaches, that comes down to the security of the underlying digital public infrastructure. So if we're talking about the governments like Estonia, Iceland, and Finland, they're utilizing data exchange systems that resolve those problems fundamentally, so that instead of, for example, lots of governments are exchanging their data in batches over the emails, documents, and so forth, which like fundamentally are prone to breaches. And then some other countries have solved those problems fundamentally in the underlying digital public infrastructure that enables secure data exchange that significantly reduces or eliminates this type of breaches that other governments are struggling with. So it's like two aspects to it.
Thanks, Andre. Sorry, we are going to have to speed up a little bit in our answers, but Theo, one or both of those questions?
Yeah, and the question of assisting people who don't use digital channels. On my lanyard, I've got an advert for Magic Notes, who are out there. I mean, I'm in this area because there's great opportunity to provide services, better services to citizens, but there's also great opportunities to empower workers and public service workers do their jobs better.
Yeah.
And if you look at the potential of AI is very much, it is a sort of G to C or B to C. It's also how it empowers those workers and the ability to take time, administrative time, out of that frontline worker and give them more time to deal face to face with their client is something that AI can really do. It's almost like we've got used to a kind of administrative tax that just gets laid on everyone in the public service. And actually, things like case working tools and other things can actually just bring that human connection back. So I see it as just like a massive opportunity for people just to do more face-to-face while something else does the hard work.
Make sure we don't leave people behind.
Exactly,
Thanks.
exactly. More about humans.
Birna, very
Yeah.
quickly from you, maybe on the elderly point, how you've dealt with that in Iceland, maybe.
Yes. So very quickly, I must agree because we have to provide services through all channels, right? Through both digital, AI chatbots, and also the good old-fashioned service. And I have to agree with you, and we have to free the servants from the mundane jobs with technology, so that we can provide extremely good service. And regarding security and data breach, as mentioned, Iceland, Estonia, and Finland, we have developed a secure data exchange platform. However, this is always an issue. We always have to keep our eye on security and data breach. It's constant, and we can never stop focusing on that. And that's what we do in Iceland, and yeah.
So quickly, the upshot of good data governance is that you don't have your sensitive data spread around all over. So we've got creaky local governments in Estonia, but when a creaky local government gets breached in Estonia, there's a whole lot less to steal, because the really interesting personal data is in well-governed central government systems that the local governments can interface to, but they're not sort of duplicating all this data. So that is an upshot of solving that. Second, on inclusion, please don't come away with me thinking, don't worry about the elderly. I was trying to make a different point, which is, if you try immediately to solve all of your customer needs at once, you're never going to get to the point where we are in Estonia. And I'll just give you 3 concrete sort of illustrations of this. First of all, a whole lot of services, there doesn't need to be a service interaction, right? The pensions, the benefits, those get calculated for the most part automatically. Now, obviously, you can review it and you can appeal and so on, but a whole lot of the services go reach out to the user. You solve the thing for them without requiring them to apply. And when you do, because the things are automatic and simple, it's not a lot of forms. It's one click, it's one button. And the thing we're really proud of is we never are going to have the expectation for citizen services, it's different for businesses, that everyone has to go through digital channels. And we're very proud of the fact that when you call the phone line for a social insurance agency, within a minute, you've got a person you're speaking to and someone who's very empathetic, very good at walking you through your case. And the reason that's possible is because the vast majority of people are solving things in an automated digital way. So it's not, I wouldn't call it the stubborn 15, it's also, but it's not the 15 for us, it's the 5. And so I think you can get from the 15 to the 5, and that's just a thing of iterating. But don't discount the 80-year-olds who use their smartphone to talk to their grandchildren, also being perfectly capable of using a decently well-designed interface to solve their problems.
Definitely.
Thanks. Chris, I'm going to ask you to answer those, and I've got one last question for you as well.
Everything's covered, points have been covered beautifully. I think in the UK, we think about how we store data. I think there's been some excellent work that we've done around one login. On our front row over here, we've got our person who leads on security, and they spoke yesterday. Totally agree. It's about how you store it, where you store it, and just having it everywhere is not the way to do it. Invest in the place you store it and keep it safe. I think the age thing's absolutely, I think it's not, the people aren't the stubborn 15, the number's the stubborn number. We're not a country that does ID cards, so we are starting from a different place than some other countries. However, what we can do is make sure our channels are open for all. But I do think if we move to the next phase where we start thinking about the opportunities for loved ones to sign in on behalf of their mums and dads, for example, then you start to take away some of these barriers and you make communities work better.
Brilliant, fantastic. Chris, before we wrap up, this is the end of the 2 days of innovation. So it's been a fantastic final session here, and I think it has brought together lots of the issues that have come up during the 2 days. But just your reflections on the whole 2 days, and how have you found the whole conference?
Well, I think I'll start with the energy. It's been a really energetic couple of days. When I walked in yesterday, I just couldn't get over how many people were here. And for most countries, the civil service are going through quite a lot of change. But people have really turned up. Like, they've turned up, they are engaged in sessions, they are taking part. So I'd just say an enormous thank you for making the time. And then my reflections are sort of always a bit simple, really. I always talk in the office about the three M's. I think we've seen clearly that people have got missions, whether that's in the UK, whether that's at a department level, the blueprint for government, a country level, internationally. So our missions are strong. We've got a clear view about where we want to go, and it's come out clearly in the last 2 days. The money question's there, isn't it? Can we afford it? What should we invest in? And in the UK, we're going through a big SR review. So we're right in the home of that moment of going, can we fundamentally make it happen this time, and can we afford it? And I think I've still got that as a nagging moment that we've all got to lean into. So we talk about our mission, but the third one is the mandate. And for the UK, we've had a bit of a step change in this area. We've got a government that is saying digital is important, it's part of the solution, innovation is important, it will enhance the growth agenda, we are bothered about citizens. And so doesn't come from, I'm not a political appointee, it doesn't come from a political perspective, but what it says is that we do have a mission for change. So for the people at this conference in the last 2 days, you came, you took part, you are engaged in the future of where we go, and absolutely our citizens are counting on us to step up. So for me, it's a time of great energy, a moment for us all to say, we go again, because there's more to do.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And please join me. I mean, it was a wonderful panel to end on, because you all set out that ambition of how great it can be. So thank you to our great panel. I'd also, just 2 minutes of your time, I'd like to say thank you now to all of our fantastic speakers. I mean, to all of you here, but we have had brilliant speakers throughout the 2 days of innovation. So thanks to all of our speakers from across the UK government, from across the wider public sector, and especially to those who have flown in from other countries. It's been fantastic to have that global perspective, and really important to share those conversations with each other. Thank you to all of our sponsors as well. I'm sure you've all enjoyed the exhibition. I think it's been really great to have that exchange of ideas across the sectors as well. Thank you to our colleagues who made today as great as it was. You really helped to make it happen. So thanks to everyone that we worked with in government, and in particular to Chris and to everybody in the Government Digital Service. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you all again, and to all of your colleagues who are here. And I'd also like to thank, because they don't get a mention often because it gets forgotten, so all of the Global Government Forum colleagues as well, who have worked so hard, not least running around with all the microphones, but so much work goes into these events, even if AI has helped us a little bit. So much work still goes into all of these events. Just before I say my final thank you, to those of you who have reserved a place on the dinner, I've been told to say the bus will be leaving soon after this if you want to meet in the catering area. You will know if you are one of those. Sorry, it's too late to join now. If you know you're already one of those, please meet us all in the catering point. And then finally, a huge thank you to you, our fantastic audience. You really have made these 2 days special. As Chris said, I know how hard you all work, and it's fantastic that you've taken the time to come here and have been so engaged. If you have enjoyed this conference, please go on the Global Government Forum website. We have a Data and AI Live conference, which will take place in London on the 18th of September. We also have a FinTech conference taking place in Dublin on the 11th of June. So if you're interested in all things technology and payments. But throughout the year, we also run a whole host of webinars, kind of online events. There's lots of research on there. So please do, if you haven't already, go on the Global Government Forum website, and at the very least, join up for our newsletter, and then you'll get information about all of these other fantastic events. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next one. Thanks so much.
Well done. Well done.